I think it's safe to say that if you want some of the most fun, creative, and forward-thinking games in the industry, then look to the independent developers and small-scale studios on platforms like Steam and itch.io. In an industry where big companies want to leech the money from consumers with things like games as a service and loot boxes, indie devs typically don't have to deal with such creative restriction. I'm not saying indie games can do no wrong. Believe me, there are plenty of grim artifacts out there that prove otherwise, but there are a ton of games out there that are performing just as well, occasionally even better than AAA games. Minecraft, Undertale, and Five Nights at Freddy's to list off some notable examples. And on the top 25 top-rated games on Steam, about over half of them could be considered indie. But we're not talking about all those games, we're only going to talk about one of them. It's got 6,439 reviews as of recording, only 36 of them are negative, and the craziest part is that it's not even complete yet. This video is about a passion project called Ultrakill is helmed by RC Hakita Patala, and is very much inspired by games like Quake and Devil May Cry, encapsulating the best of both. It's a lightning-fast FPS with a ranking system that rewards you, the player, for making creative use of your weapons to overwhelm and decimate the denizens of Hell's depths. The game is also deliberately made to look like a PlayStation 1 game, complete with low-res, low-poly models and texture warping, all that good stuff. But if you're a coward with no taste, or it just makes your eyes feel funny looking at it, you can always play the game with a higher resolution and disable the PSX effects. Or, if you're a complete madman, you can even go Ultrakill on the graphics settings. Yes! Now this is gaming! There's a lot to find and admire in Ultrakill, so much that I haven't quite scratched the surface myself. I'm still working on getting perfect ranks on every mission and nursing my poor fingers back to health after attempting to learn all the advanced tech, all in preparation for the currently upcoming update. Hi, Post-Sage here to tell you that the update already came out while I was making the video. That should teach me to not take too long making these freaking videos, because shit like this will just happen and really none of us want that, so I'll go ahead and take the L on this, but at least the content that got added is really cool. But yeah, back to the video. Sorry. Keep in mind, this is in early access for $20 US, yet it already has plenty of replayable content to sink your teeth into. The acclaim that Ultrakill has received is more than well deserved, but if you aren't convinced already, well, that's why I'm here. And to persuade you into buying this game already, that means I have to start talking about its biggest selling point. There's so much thought put into every little detail of this game, from the PS1 aesthetic, the level and enemy design, and the soundtrack, but the core gameplay is easily the biggest thing advertised, and for a damn good reason. Ultrakill has some combat, and boy oh boy let me tell you about it. It controls like Quake or Unreal Tournament, shooters where movement and dodging the bad people is just as important as pointing the crosshair at the bad people and pressing left click. Your movement speed is always fast. There is no slowing down, only going faster, and this is the foundation that Ultrakill stands on. The protagonist, V1, has a great number of options when it comes to moving around that allow for solid evasive maneuvers and player expression. Arguably, the dash is your most crucial ability. It acts similar to how it works in Doom Eternal. It's the primary method of repositioning yourself in combat, dodging attacks thanks to its invincibility frames, or just boost yourself forward to avoid meeting your long-dead makers if you're falling off a cliff. You can dash on the ground or while airborne up to 3 times in a row until you need to let the stamina gauge recharge. Mastering the delicate art of zip-zip zooming across the place is paramount to maximize your survivability, so keep this in mind. You can also slide on the ground by holding down left control, which is sick as hell first and foremost, but it's also faster than running and it can be held down indefinitely. However, your stamina will stop recharging while you're sliding, it has no iframes, and you will have to initiate another slide if you want to change directions in the middle of it. You can also aim freely while sliding, allowing you to move in one direction while firing behind you. Jumping is also crucial since it will let you maintain vertical distance between you and any enemies, making you harder to hit, especially if you can connect wall jumps and ground pounds to ascend even higher. Movement is everything in Ultrakill, and Ikeda has made sure you will learn through playing the game by adding enemies and obstacles that require you to use your movement options to your advantage. The use of all of your movement abilities is also further encouraged by the tried and true style system that's been shamelessly borrowed from DMC. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see a panel that shows how well you're playing by giving you a letter-based ranking, the lowest being D for destructive, and eventually peaking at Ultrakill rank. Yeah, this is how the alphabet works. Style in Ultrakill basically acts as a score multiplier. The higher your rank, the more points you earn for the special actions that are shown below the rank. If you vary the actions you perform, like killing multiple enemies with a single explosion, killing an enemy in midair, deflecting a projectile, or pushing an enemy into hazards like pits or hydraulic presses, you can get higher ranks faster, which then gives you better results at the end of a level. It encourages and rewards players to experiment with different weapons and strategies, not only to find efficient ways to dunk on demons, but to feel like a badass while doing it too. However, you can't style on the damned without weapons, but thankfully, V1 has one hell of an arsenal.
Oh yeah, nice
wow,
one, mate.
that was the worst joke
I've ever heard. David
Things are only gonna go downhill from here, you know.
Wanker.
The way weapons work here is really cool. As of now, there are 4 guns in the game. Technically. Each weapon in the game has 4 different variations that change the function of the weapon's alternate fire. For instance, the revolver's initial alt fire is a charge shot that can pierce through enemies in glass. But when you visit the little kiosk at the beginning of every stage, you can buy alternate variations for your weapons with the points you accumulate at the end of every stage based on how well you perform. So now we can buy the sharpshooter variation for the revolver, which does this.
Holy shit, I'm gonna come.
Each variation of these weapons completely alters how you approach encounters, even in the most subtle of ways. For instance, the shotgun. It currently has 2 variations, the base mode acting like a grenade launcher that explodes on impact, while the alternate mode can let you pump the shotgun to increase its damage and spread. Do you want to get rid of a group of cannon fodder with a big explosion, or do you want to charge your next shot up to deal more damage and recover more health? Oh, I should probably mention that last part, huh? So another big gimmick that Ultrakill has in its gameplay, perhaps the main gimmick outside of the movement and style system, is that there are technically no health pickups for you to collect around the stages, and checkpoints will restore your health if you pass through them. So how are you meant to recover? Well, the game does say blood is fuel for a reason. By damaging enemies at close range, you can douse yourself in their blood, which regenerates your health. It's a brilliantly simple yet extremely effective way to implement risk versus reward. You can stay away and keep picking enemies off from a rather safe distance while dodging their attacks, or you can risk getting hit by a stray projectile or 2 and shoot at them so you can recover health. For a game that technically isn't complete yet, especially for a game that obviously has new mechanics and surprises in store for the future, Ultrakill's main combat loop has a lot going for it that makes it fun to play and replay. And that's not even getting into some of the tech some people are finding in this game. Like, I won't get into any of it here because, honestly, my brain isn't wrinkled enough to describe how tech works in any game, so I'll just go ahead and direct you towards Herb Messiah's channel because he is easily the best Ultrakill player right now. I mean, look at this. How do you figure this stuff out? Like, I don't... I'm confident that whenever this game is finished and has no more updates left to look forward to, the community will find some new ways to have fun and impress people on the internet, much like how the Devil May Cry Combo Mad community does it, though maybe not quite on that scale. We'll see where that takes us. To round out the rest of the things to note before we move on, there's also a bonus wave-based arena mode called the Cyber Grind that can be accessed at any point from the main menu or at the pre-level kiosks. It's a survival mode where you simply have to last as long as possible while slaughtering endless myriad hordes of Hell's denizens. Even some bosses will show up alongside regular enemies, albeit slightly weakened to make things a bit fairer on you. This is a great way to stock up on currency to buy those weapon variations, and it serves as a decent way to practice against certain enemy types. There's even an official editor that lets you create new layouts and import them into the game to play around with, which is just plain sick, even if I'm too lazy to try it out myself. It's also got custom skin support as well. You can just import any image you want into the Ultrakill folder, and there you go. Just go fucking nuts. Admittedly, I would like to see a training mode where you can spawn certain enemies and see what makes them tick, but I won't bitch and moan if that's not in the cards. There's plenty of secrets to find as well, from orbs and level-specific challenges that give you bonus currency, hidden bosses and items, and a secret level in every layer of hell. I won't spoil these things too much, so you can find them on your own if you haven't already, but they are very interesting, to say the least. We also have a pretty good options menu as well, plenty of things for you to play around with for your convenience or amusement, as well as some pretty solid accessibility options. Some things like modifying the amount of damage you're taking or slowing the game down will make it so you can't earn perfect ranks or post your cybergrind scores on the leaderboards, but it doesn't penalize you in any other way, so don't feel bad if you need to use them. Though on the topic of options, even though there isn't a lot of spoken dialogue in Ultrakill, like at all as of right now, I will say subtitles would be nice to have as someone who has some trouble mentally processing speech. I'll leave it off there. I did neglect to mention a couple things, but I'll leave them as some surprises if you're going into this game more blind than me going down the stairs at 2:15 a.m. for a glass of water. But for now, I'd personally like to move on to another thing that's got a lot of effort put into it. One very important thing to know is that Hikita is a big fat nerd for music. Like, just a really big dork. But that's okay, because so am I. He makes his music appreciation known with the frequent references you can catch throughout the game if you're also familiar with them, but the other thing you really need to keep in mind is that Hikita is also the one making all of the music for this game. Well, that's not quite true. There's a couple public domain songs in here, and the music that plays in the Cybergrind is done by an artist called Meganeko, but 90% of original music is composed by Hikita. So, how do I feel about it? If there's one thing Hikita particularly excels at, it's creating an atmosphere and tone that matches the levels and environments you'll blast your way through. There's a lot of variety in the music, but as a whole it's inspired by industrial metal and drum and bass. You'll be hearing a lot of drum loops, samples, synthesizers, and guitars throughout, but Hikita knows how to mix stuff up to avoid making things sound samey so you don't get fatigued listening to identical tracks over and over again, which is admittedly something the Prelude does struggle with, but that gets fixed as soon as you enter the first act proper. I will say, the further you progress in the game, the more you notice Hikita improving as a musician, and he even acknowledges this in the commentary PDF that's included with the Bandcamp release of the Act 1 soundtrack. I highly recommend buying the album if you can, it's really good. While the music in the Prelude is fun, heavy, and definitely fits the aesthetic to a T, you can tell that once you start reaching the other layers of hell, he starts experimenting more with different tones, techniques, and sounds. Of course, there's also plenty of songs that also act as palate cleansers. Quite a handful of tracks dip into ambient soundscapes of the soothing and dread-inducing varieties, and there's also a handful of classical compositions that tend to precede larger revelations. Hikita knows how to pace the aggressive tracks and when to slow down, even if it's just for a moment, which is something that takes more thought and restraint than you would imagine. He's just as good at making music as he is at making fun and engaging gameplay, which to me is always worth praising. I'm gonna let you listen to some excerpts from the soundtrack real quick. Stepping away from music to move on to its equally attractive twin, the sound design is just it's so good. It's one of the most crucial things you can possibly do when making sounds for an action game of this kind is to make sure that every single little noise gives the player awareness. Weapons must be distinguishable from each other, enemies and their attacks must be immediately recognizable upon hearing the sounds they make, and important actions like jumping, dodging, whatever, they have to sound like you're performing those actions. Thankfully, the sound design does all of that and then some. Ultrakill may honestly have some of my favorite sound effects in an action game. Everything is just on point. The wind rushing past you when you dash, pistons hissing and mechanical parts whirring when you jump, the steady rumble of energy when you charge a revolver shot, I still remember how I felt when I first heard the freight train impact sound when you punch your shotgun pellets. It's just... whew. So the sound effects themselves are great, you may say, but can I tell when a little armless goblin is gonna gank me from the other side of the arena? Oh dear theoretical viewer, I see you know of the great action game litmus test. Well, I am behooved to say that yes, you can, and more. Nearly every enemy in this game has some sort of tell that cues you in to recognize what attack they will use, mostly visually, but the audio cues are just as recognizable and important. You may notice that a handful of attacks from some enemies and bosses will have this noticeable ping sound along with an orange flash. These two cues often mean the incoming attack can be deflected or parried with your fist or shotgun, and once you start to realize that, you begin to keep an ear out for when that ping is heard. This is just really good sound design. Basic, sure, but there's a reason why it's implemented in so many action games. I'm sorry if I sound too eager about this stuff. Music and sound design this good just gets me all excited, like I'm about to go down a really good water slide with colors and stuff. This is the kind of design that makes most of Platinum Games' catalog so good, and it wouldn't be nearly as effective if that particular sound wasn't the common factor between most of these attacks. Of course, there are some parryable attacks that don't have that audiovisual cue, but they often have a long wind-up animation that does just as much to clue you in. As an aspiring musician and sound designer, the audio in this game is what I consider to be the ideal. I want all games to have this degree of thought, care, and effort put into its sound because Ultrakill does everything right on that front as far as I'm concerned. And, the swans and Godflesh references are nice to see too, just saying. Flex your muscles! So if Neo 2 didn't get released on the year Everything and Nothing happened, then I think Ultrakill would easily be my game of the year for 2020. Despite me sucking at this game and it making my fingers hurt, who needs antidepressants when you could punch the pellets from your shotgun? Okay, hold on, I still need to reiterate that because it still blows my mind. You can punch the pellets from your shotgun and make them explode. If that doesn't make you want to spend your painfully earned paycheck from your minimum wage job that treats you less than human, then I have no clue what will. As of now, Ultrakill is available on Steam for Windows at a price point of $19.99 US, but Ikeda has mentioned that the price will increase as the next acts are added into the game. But despite this game being in early access, there is so much content and gameplay depth to sink your teeth into. I think $20 for Ultrakill is like bank robbery in a Fast and Furious movie. But if you're still not convinced, there is a free downloadable demo that lets you play through the Prelude chapter and the first level of Limbo, which is still about a solid 30 minutes to an hour or so of gameplay on an initial playthrough. I highly recommend trying the demo out if you're curious. I'm really eager to see what Ikeda has in store for us in the near future, because the scraps he's been giving us have me making monkey sounds like the feral creature I am. With games like Ultrakill out there, it proves that the fire burns bright with hope that indie games will continue to be creative and memorable in their own ways. Really, I could write a thesis paper on all the things that Ultrakill's sound design does right, but I'm about to graduate? Graduate? Is that even a word? Hold on. Okay, that's not a real word.